Hey, this is Levgen. This is a new format in which I wanted to show who a tattoo artist is, what happens in our tattoo life, and how fun it is. Write down in comments whose story you like the most and let's choose the winner.
Hi, I'm Trevor Collis. I own Electric Unicorn Tattoo Studio in St. Louis, Missouri.
Hi, I'm Daryl Lapuebla. I've been tattooing since 2013, originally from San Diego, California, living out here in Connecticut.
I've been tattooing for 29 years so far. Come December will be my 30th year. I've started in Minneapolis and worked in Germany, Miami, and then done conventions around the world.
Traveled pretty much all the United States, tattooed here, Midwest, a bunch of places, Nevada, San Diego. Hope to see you soon.
I've got a few
crazy stories
about tattooing. I would love to share them with you.
And would love to share them with you and my friend here.
And I am not a Russian spy. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Oh.
I'll go first. This lady comes in, she sends me an email. She goes, hey, so do you use any numbing creams, right? So I'm like, I've used them in the past and I just personally don't like using numbing stuff because it limits my time that I'm able to tattoo you because I've used it on myself and it just doesn't work out well. Regardless, so she comes in, she's like, okay, that's fine. So she comes in and she says, so you really don't use any numbing stuff? I'm like, I told you in the email, no, I do not. Mind you, her tattoo is a small heart on her sternum. So right here.
Okay.
So I understand her nervousness and all this stuff. In the email, she says it's her first tattoo. And when she comes in, I'm looking at her and her eyebrows are the darkest tattooed eyebrows I've ever seen. Like, dark. So I'm like, so did you get your eyebrows done? And she's like, oh yeah. I'm like, so that's kind of like tattooing. It's tattooing. And she's like, well, I guess that's kind of why I was asking for like the numbing stuff because that was awful, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, all right, I get where you're coming from. She's like, regardless, I'm gonna use an inside numbing. I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, oh, I'm gonna set up an IV. I'm like, you're gonna what? And I'm like, in my head, I heard IV, but I wasn't thinking, you're gonna put an IV in yourself and you're worried about a tattoo. Like, I'm like, what's happening? So I'm like, okay, what? I don't expect her to have an IV on her. I'm like, I'm gonna go set up the stencil. So I go print out a whole heart, little tiny heart, going right here. And I come back and she has a bottle, starts taking things out. My tattoo bed's over here. I'm getting my stencil ready. Next thing you know, she goes, excuse me. I'm like, hi. And she goes, do you have gloves? And I'm like, oh my gosh. What do you plan on doing? And she goes, I'm gonna set up an IV. And I'm like, but you're worried about a tattoo. It's not the same. Like, they're not the same. I'm like, I'm a little squeamish. Like, I don't want you, doing any of that in here. Like, you signed a waiver saying you're not under anything, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't need you doing any of that. Next thing you know, she has it, she boop, pops it in. It's in there. It's straight up. It's in there. And she's looking at me and she goes, excuse me. I say, I look over like this. I'm like, hi. And she goes, can you help me? I'm like, oh God. Oh God. I don't do IVs. I've never done an IV in my life. Like, I'm not a medical professional. I don't do IVs. So she goes, I need 2 hands. And I can't. Yeah, I can't, So I'm like, yeah, I see that. Like, and I'm like, she's gonna bleed out here. So I'm like, all right, I put on gloves. I'm like, what do you need me to do? She goes, put your thumb right here. I'm like, okay. So I have my gloved hand. I'm sitting there. Okay. She goes, no, right here. She takes my thumb. She goes, right here. Moves it like that. As she moves my thumb, it goes, bloop. A little water fountain over onto her leg. I'm like, oh. I'm gonna pass out. I'm gonna pass out. I'm like, lady, this is not the same as tattooing. Like, I have passed out from watching a piercing. Like, she's like, ha ha, I'm making the tattoo artist pass out. Ha ha, this is so funny. I don't know how addicts do this. I'm like, me freaking either, man. What are you doing right now? Like, she's like, oh, it's okay, I got it, blah, blah, blah. She got the fucking, you know, the little whatever thingy in there. And she goes, I need you to help screw on this tube now.
You weren't just like, stop?
I'm like, you're not bleeding. I'm like, can we go home? Can we put a Band-Aid on there? Like, what's going on? I'm stressed. I'm sweating. It's hot. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? So I tell her, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna screw this on. She does all the rest of the stuff. Mind you, she's holding this little freaking bottle of saline. And she goes, can I hang this anywhere? I was like, hang this anywhere? I'm like, you gotta drive home. Like, what is in you? Like, what's happening? I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I'm talking to the other artists in the shop. I'm like, what do I do? Where do I go? I don't know how to.
Did you ask if she had an earring? You can just hang it on that.
You know? So she looks at me, she goes, she's looking at my light and all this stuff. Finally, she looks at my wall. I had moved a painting that I was working on. There was a command hook. She goes, perfect. Hangs it on the little thing, lays in the bed and just goes, I'm ready. I'm like, you're kidding. Get out. Like, no way. No way. Don't tattoo her. But still, wild. Wild thing
She
to
went
shoot
through
out
a
as
lot of
kid.
work. Why didn't you just tattoo her?
Because I don't know. I'm thinking liability to the shop, liability to myself. What if she comes back and is like, what the fuck? Like,
That's probably true.
so, you know, like at the end of the day, didn't end up tattooing, but one of the wildest experiences I've ever been through in my life. I'm not a medical professional to that extent. I do bloodborne pathogens, first aid, not IVs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one, man. That is wild. Well, I don't have a story like that, but my name is Trevor. I've been tattooing. I started in 1993, and I had just gotten out of the military, off of active duty, and I was hanging out at this nightclub, and I was painting murals for these bikers. It was a bikers nightclub that my friends were trying to do like an industrial night at, you know. So I'm in there and I'm painting murals and helping out, like put together this club night. And I'm living in the hood, and I've got like a roommate. His name's Jason, and Jason wanted a scarecrow tattoo, right? So he's like, Trevor, draw me a scarecrow. And so I draw him a scarecrow. He's like, do you know anybody that does tattoos? And I'm like, I think I heard like the bikers at this nightclub tell me that they have a friend I can ask. So I asked Fish, that's the owner of the nightclub. I'm like, Fish, do you know anybody that does tattoos? I heard you might. And so he's like, yeah, my friend Vicky, she lives upstairs. I'm like, right, you live upstairs of a nightclub, right?
Yeah.
Cool, well, my roommate wants to get a tattoo. Like, can you set me up so I can ask her how much for it, right? So the next week, Vicky comes down and I'm talking to Vicky, and Vicky's like, I'm like, how much for the tattoo? Well, she's like, I'm not gonna do it, it has too much detail. And so I keep asking questions and I'm really just annoying her, right? And she's like, look, why don't you just do the tattoo? And I'm like, well, I don't obviously tattoo, otherwise I wouldn't be talking to you. And
Right.
she's like, okay, so I'm gonna show you how to tattoo, and then you can do the tattoo, because, you know, Fish basically wanted me to, like, you know, hook you up anyways.
And you've never tattooed before?
I've
in
never
your life?
tattooed at all. And I'm like, all right, well, let me see. So I talked to Jason. Jason's like, fuck off, right? He's like, there's no way you're gonna do a tattoo, your first tattoo on me. Now, like other friends and stuff were like, dude,
But he
you
liked
should
your drawing,
tattoo,
right?
And he liked the drawing. And so anyways, Vicky's like, well, I can't really like show you how to tattoo unless you find someone. So I did what any 19-year-old, and I'm working at this nightclub, and Vicky's like, well, you gotta find somebody. So I did anything that a 19-year-old guy would do. I called up an ex-girlfriend that wanted to get back together, and I said, Mandy, you know, like, I really like you, and I'll start dating you again if you let me do a tattoo on you. It's probably the biggest dirtbag move I've ever done in my life, but it was par for the course at this point. So Mandy's like, yeah, that'd be great. So she wanted to get a tribal sun with the Eye of Horus or Ra in the middle of the Egyptian eye. So I draw it up.
Where on the body?
On her shoulder blade, right? And I'm like, all right, cool. So I draw up this tribal sun and, you know, Eye of Horus, and fine line is everything. So it's all about the sharp points of tribal. And the tribal is like maybe an 1/8 inch deep.
In the height of the 90s tribal, in the height of the 90s
Yeah,
tribal.
it was sweet. It was definitely sweet. So we set up the time and we go upstairs, and Vicky's showing me how to do a tattoo, and she busts out some sweet Spalding and Rogers equipment, and like the grips are smaller than my pinky. The old No.
Old
2
steels.
pencil-sized grips.
Yeah.
Very, very old school, right?
Yeah.
And the machines are probably not tuned at all, right? And she's like, well, you set it up like this, and so we're setting it up. And all the bikers came in. So we're in her apartment, above a nightclub, surrounded by bikers, and Mandy's nervous and scared because she's like an 18-year-old girl with her shirt like half off or in her bra. And I'm trying to do my first tattoo, and I'm like scared. So the two of us looked like a rictogram going on. And we're both sweating. It's middle of winter. It felt like it was like the hottest day of summer. And the sweat is lubricating my hand. And at the end of the first tattoo I ever did, it looked like a sweet gum berry out of like a tree.
Instead of a
It was
tribal.
so
Yeah. That's what,
And now we're here.
The things we know,
30 years
right?
later, I'm still doing it.
that was your first tattoo.
Still doing.
Your first tattoo.
maybe a picture of that?
I don't. I wish I could call Mandy, but
Is that the
there's no
craziest
chance.
tattoo? So what's the craziest
I mean,
tattoo?
I'm gonna say that was like craziest. Like if you're surrounded by 7 bikers
Yeah.
that are all leathered up,
Yeah.
and they're hovering over you,
For your first tattoo?
and you have no clue, and you're using, I'm just gonna say this, anybody who hasn't had the pleasure of using an old school tattoo machine with a tight 3 liner to do a piece of
With
tribal.
a tiny grip?
Oh yeah, it's small. So like your
Yeah.
hand is cramping up, and like,
So uncomfortable.
and the vibration like affects the machine.
This
right?
is coils, not rotaries. You
Oh
know?
yeah. The
let's be
old
real.
day of coils,
Yeah, you
right?
know?
And so it just sounds like brap, 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 you know. And so the noise is there. There was one of the bikers. His name was Rob. Rob had a lazy eye, and he's leaning over, and his eye is like going south. And you're just like, oh my God, I'm gonna die today.
That's honestly.
How long have you been dating with Mandy after the tattoo?
We lasted like 3 months. It was a big investment. Your turn.
All right. As long as we're going with first tattoos, I mean, my first tattoo was at a house party. It was so my friends, like, I've been drawing all my life. They're like, dude, you should do tattoos, blah, blah, blah. And I'm the kind of person that, like, you tell me I'm gonna to do something, I'm like, fuck you, you don't know me. Like,
Right.
nah. So it took me forever to get into the tattoo industry, which I thought, like, I was never like, oh, I need to be a tattooer. And it kind of happened to me by circumstance.
So you weren't thinking, oh, I need to be a biker?
I mean, that
Because
was
I was
a
surrounded
better
by
option.
bikers. I'm just saying.
No, not growing up in the south side of San Diego. No, definitely not.
Nice.
So my first tattoo was at a house party. My friends had bought me a machine, and my friend
That's
grew up.
very nice of your friend.
Yeah, they bought me a machine off eBay. You know,
Right.
the little kit with all
Oh,
the
yeah.
things.
Oh,
you know.
God.
So the little eBay kit, and my friend had his parents owned a tattoo shop back in the day.
Oh, okay.
So he's like, yeah, I'll set it up, blah blah blah. And I'm like the kind of person who likes to research everything before I even touch anything. I've watched 100 YouTube videos by this point, and I'm just still not confident enough to even put anything in the skin. Mind you, we've been drinking at this house party. He's like, yeah, I got it. Sets it up in like 10 minutes, no gloves, no nothing, just rubber bands, coil machine, and ink, and basically, you know.
Was it like at least in like a water bottle cap?
It was not, I'm not gonna tell you it was sanitary. Like, it wasn't. But,
Using bottle caps.
you know, and so my
kitchen
first
cups.
tattoo, I'm like, yeah, I'll just, so he does a Stussias on my friend's leg. And I'm
Okay.
like, yeah, it looks easy enough, we can do that. So I'm like, all right, let's do a rose on your other leg. So he's sitting in the chair, and I'm like, all right, I draw, a Sharpie rose and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, I line it out. I'm like, get it. It's like I want to say, a 7-round liner in like a 14-round tube.
Wow, that's awesome.
With
spitting everywhere.
I honestly don't think there was a rubber band on there. It was
They're
fantastic,
overrated.
They didn't need it. Tension, overrated.
Yeah.
So I don't really know voltage or anything like that. I just turn on the machine, it does the thing, it makes the noise. Put it on him.
That's a good start.
It looks like a rose, like I'm like
Nice.
solid. He stands up.
It looks
Mind you, I've been drawing on him. He's been sitting the whole freaking time. So my first tattoo, I learned you always stencil standing up because it went to whoop, whoop,
It looked
little
like a
raisin.
hamburger.
And to this day, he won't let me touch it. He's my best friend in the world, but he won't let me touch it. It's like having a kindergartner's first drawing on the first man. And I was like, his wife colors it in for date night and stuff. I'm like, man, please let me cover you. But that's the life of old tattoos, man.
That's awesome. That is a good one. Well, let's fast forward a little bit. Back, I don't know, you started in the mid 2000s.
yeah.
All right, so you're way past this era, but in the 90s there were these things called magazines.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And they used to be the heart and soul. They were like the Instagram or social media of
I used to go
tattooing
to-
back in the day, and like we would run off to the stores to get the 4 magazines that would come out, and like in there, like they would repeat a bunch of the photos. So you might get like 100 photos, and like you wanted to get those before every other shop, right? More so, you wanted to get into those tattoo magazines. So back in the day, we would always like send photos off to the different magazines to get published. So it was somewhere around like 98, 99. I finally got an article. I had a few pictures like throughout, and I was so damn excited, man. I'm like, I finally made it, dude, right? So like I had to send in a photo, and then they had a guy that, like we didn't have cell phones or texting.
Right,
so we
right.
had to like play phone tag for a while, and we finally found a time that we could do a phone interview where this writer was gonna write up my article. And I'm like, oh man, this is great. This is like so professional and like big time. So we do the interview, and part of my history is like I said before, I was in the military before I started tattooing, and my job in there was psychological operations, and I'm a Russian linguist and then an interrogator, right? And so the interviewer got caught up on this, and he's like, oh, you're like a spy. And I'm like,
no.
whoa, no, I'm not really like a spy at all. There's
Like,
nothing about
don't
me.
even say that word at all.
Like, I draw propaganda for the military, man. Like, that's not really a spy. He's like, oh yeah, you're like James Bond. And I'm like, I don't know if I like where this is going, but yeah, man, this is exciting. You're the writer, you know best. So the article comes out, and I rush off to the store, and I pick it up, and I open it up. It's got the photo of me, and the title is From Russia with Love, playing off of the current James Bond movie, right? And I'm like, oh, that's kind of funny. That's kind of cute. James Bond's like kind of a cool guy. Nice. So I go to, I think it was the Minneapolis or Anaheim Tattoo Convention. Everybody's like, oh, hey, man, you're that guy from Russia. So for the next 5 years, everybody thought I was from Russia. And I'm like tattooing over in Germany in Heidelberg at this shop called Crazy Greg's. And over there, people are like, oh, dude, you're the Russian guy. Cool. Anybody that speaks Russian or is from like East Berlin, we're going to give them to you. I'm like, my Russian's so bad. I'm like, that's probably a bad idea. And then I come back to the States. I went up to the Berlin show, and they're like, oh, you're the Russian guy. And I'm like, I'm not from Russia, man.
With your American accent, we're like also turned off by it.
So anyway, I get back to the States, and I get a job at Brad Fink's shop, Iron Age in St. Louis, and the same thing happens. And they're like, oh, dude, we got a client for you. And she came in, and one of the photos from the article that was like really nice on like this lower back and was designed for this client was like on this really old lady's chest.
No.
Just done poorly. And I'm
One
like,
of your tattoos had done in a different
and I
spot.
was just like, man, That's what happens when you get famous.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, people copy your stuff just
Like the
very
same
poorly.
curves and everything on the chest
It was
instead?
just,
Oh
yeah,
my
but
gosh.
they just traced it and put it
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
But then gravity distorted.
Like when you see, like,
it was
someone
like
gets,
the
like,
warp tool on Procreate,
Yeah.
like, whoa.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like,
When you see, like, someone
that was,
tattoo a
that was,
nipple
that
in
was
a design
exactly
or
what my
something.
ego did too. It just went,
It's wild. I think a lot of people think that because you're a tattooer, you fall into that category of, I'm a bondage type person or weird or,
Right.
alternative.
right.
For instance, I had a client, she was coming in to get a rib tattoo. She wanted a small hummingbird. The shop I was at, the stencil machine was all the way on the other side of the shop. I work in a personal room. And I'm like, all right, yeah, go ahead and, we're gonna do the rib tattoo. Go ahead and remove your shirt and then lay down on the bed and we'll, get it going. I run back, get the stencil, come back fully nude. She's completely naked. And I'm like, where's this going? And she's like, oh, right here on the ribs. And I'm like, so why are your pants off? Like,
She's comfortable.
and her response is, you guys see this all the time. And I'm like,
It's true.
I do, but like not because I'm tattooing that area. You know what I mean? Not because it's like, oh, this is how I want to be. But I feel like that's what the connotation is. Being a tattooer is like, you're okay with this all the time. And it's like,
Right.
not everyone is.
So is that where you drew the line?
I still tattooed her. I was like,
right,
she's fine.
right.
Like later on, I come to find out she's comfortable that way because she's like a sexual therapist or something.
Fantastic.
Exactly. But like me going into it, I'm like, what's happening?
Right,
I did
because
not
you
know.
were waylaid by it. You were surprised. I'll talk about Germany. I was tattooing at a shop named Crazy Greg's. And Greg, he was an amazing guy. He was like truly old school. I loved working with him. He made his own power supplies, his own tube tips and soldered the tips in. And like, we sat down and we learned how to boil. He taught me how to boil down black so you get like really concentrated black. Like all these little things that just like aren't passed on very much anymore.
Do you feel like we've lost some of that craft?
A lot, yeah. So, and which is a whole nother story about like why I finally decided to mentor somebody after 20 years. I'm in Greg's shop and I'm mostly tattooing American soldiers that were stationed in Heidelberg and a few Eastern Europeaners because apparently I was the Russian guy. And this girl came in and we started out and she's like, I want a dragon eye. And I'm like, great, where do you want it? She's like, I want it where the hair grows. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. In Germany, now mind you, in the States, lower back tattoos were super popular, like lower back tribals.
Yep.
And then until they got destroyed by late night TV with the term tramp stamp,
Correct.
which was completely poorly used. I did like the German version, butt horn better, because it was really just saying the lower back tribal tattoos that were shaped like horns, right, was a tramp stamp. But then like in the States, because of late night TV, it just became a joke that anybody with a lower back tattoo had a tramp stamp. Anyways, in Germany, they were more in the front region. They're like, this is way more sensual, this is way more sexual.
And you can see it.
And you can, well, you can see it either way. It just depends on which way you're facing, I guess, right?
It's very true.
But she's like, so we start with that. And then that heals and she comes back 2 weeks later. She's like, I love it. I want teeth down around my labia. And I'm like, dragon teeth? She's like, yes, of course.
Of course.
And I'm like, fantastic, we're gonna do dragon teeth. So I'm adding a dragon mouth to an eye. And we get done. It's terrifyingly beautiful. I have to say, it was like one of my favorite tattoos that I was never given permission to take photos of.
Okay.
Right? She came back 2 weeks later, after that was healed, and she's like, I want claws. So we've got claws, teeth, and an eye. I can't say anymore. That was it. So that's probably the craziest
just created
place
a whole
the
monster down
craziest
there.
tattoo I've ever done.
I've only done one.
It was fantastic.
One in that area that said "Oh hey," and that was it. Nothing
Yeah.
like that. Not
I
creating
mean,
a
like
whole
there were a
masterpiece.
number of guys that I've worked with around that time that were doing like butterflies
Yeah.
and different things like that. But the dragon aspect really was special. Kind of like when I was working at St. Sabrina's in Minneapolis. Javier came in rushing into the room. He's like, Trevor, I don't know how to handle this. And I'm like, what? He's like, you just have to see it. And I go in, and his client is in the doggy position. And he's like, I'm like, what are you tattooing? And he's like, definitely not that. And she had a big old 4-inch butt plug. And I'm like, yeah, man, good luck.
Close the door. Hey, peace out, dog.
I'm here for the other guys, man.
Yeah, you know, it's good when you see the other guys going through it, you know? So I'd say by far the craziest tattoo I've ever done is a self-portrait on a guy.
Of you?
Of himself.
Of himself?
Not like
Where?
a Steve-O portrait, on his arm.
Oh, okay.
So this guy messages me through Instagram and he goes, hey, I want a portrait of myself. And what is my response? Of course I'm gonna do the self-portrait of yourself. What did he goes, I want my face, but I want Dwight from The Office's body, which is just a guy in a suit. Like, it's just a normal, I was like, sure, fantastic, well, let's make it happen. Comes in, he's like sending me photos of him at work. I have the photos. I'll show you guys. I'll send you the photos as well. This guy, he's looking like he has like controls in the background. Takes the photo while he's at work. I'm like, sure, we'll use that. Looks great, perfect for The Office, you know. So he comes in. He's not a talker. I'm like, so why are you getting this, man? He's like, because no one else will have it. And he's like, great, that's awesome, man. And I'm asking all these questions. I'm getting like all these one-word answers, and I'm like, this is very awkward. So at the end of it, becomes a very silent tattoo session, which is okay. I'm fine with that. He looks at it and he loves the tattoo. He's like smiling in the mirror. He's like super cheesing, loves it. Goes home. 2 weeks later, I get a message on Instagram. He's like, I love my tattoo. I was hoping that we could do my cat on the other side, but I want my cat to be wearing a karate outfit with a kung fu headband. I was hoping we could add a kung fu headband to my portrait, so when I put my arms together, it looks like we're fighting in a dojo. And I'm like, yeah, let's do that. Sick. So comes in silent the whole time, gets it done. Sure enough, him with the headband, cat with, mind, like in these Instagram things, he's like sending me photos of the cat's paw in like certain positions, like every photo of his cat so I can get it perfect. Like, oh, what
Did
a
you
great.
ask him to like choreograph it to kung fu fighting?
Yeah, I wish, man. Like, so good. He hasn't reached out since then, but like, what a cool idea. Like, that's what we live for, guys. That's what we live for.
It's really good. It's very good. Hey, man.
Cool.
Pleasure meeting
Nice
you.
meeting you, my guy.
That was fun.